When I first pulled onto this land, I had kind of an eerie realization. I'd been here for a few hours, and I sat down where I had a fire going, and I realized I heard nothing. Nothing. And that's when I realized I was really, absolutely on my own out here. And if something went majorly wrong, well, I was going to have to handle that myself. Nobody talks about the middle years when it comes to off-grid living. My knees are dry. It took me about I guess I've been out here almost 6 years, and just all of a sudden my skin dried out. Nobody talks about off-grid living after the excitement wears off. What I'm going to call the middle years. That silence the first day, it's a sound or absence of that I love, but you also know that there's nobody coming to save you. Yeah, you're on your own. When I first got started, I didn't have much money. There were times when my vehicle broke down, many times, and I only had one vehicle. And I would be stuck here for a month waiting to get a part or something. So, I guess you have to be prepared always for, gosh, it's good to have at least a year's supply of food and water. And at the same time, I really love the silence. I spent most of my savings building the shop. That's the first structure I built. And after that, I didn't have enough gas money to get to town. And the day I started my business, I had no money left. I used a credit card to run a few ads that month. Just that first month, though, I've never ran ads again until just recently. But it was just a real hard start. Kind of gambling, But I figured if I failed, at least, I had the camper van. I figured at least I had the camper van in my land. So, not being extremely prepared, that initial experience was kind of a fight or flight or a survival. It really was like survival, and it was stressful, and I was fighting to stay afloat, and I was building and physically exhausted. I didn't have money, but I had time, and I was investing my physical labor in my homestead, and I pushed it probably a little harder than I should have. And you get to a point where, once I just finished this cabin, it took me about a year to build, and then I just freaking collapsed. Like, I was so beat. I was just worn out. So that first almost 6 years, I'm building shelter, water, food, power, income. This cabin is the newest addition. And I was finally able to afford to build something, in my opinion, fairly nice. It's still just a 10 by 20 cabin, but at least it's not scrap material. And a lot of my other structures are just scrap material. But, I've got greenhouses and pig pens and horse stables and a round pen and The entire property's fenced, and the homestead itself is fenced, and I've dug ponds, and just a lot of work to get all the infrastructure in place. Oh, and that's the part that most of the content is focused on, is the first day that you show up, or, you know, important builds and stuff. And that's what most off-grid or homestead videos are about. I really haven't seen anyone talk about the middle years. Eventually, things start to work. And that's when the systems are flowing and working together. The shelter, water, food, power, income. You're building stability and reducing pressure. There comes a point where shelter's stable. I have the cabin, the horses have the stables, the pigs have pig pens, there's gardens and greenhouses, and the cats can go into the geothermal and stay warm, or underneath the cabin next to the footing for the fireplace that stays warm. Everything has shelter. I can harvest a large amount of water now. We've got water underneath the sink here that can just be hand pumped, and there's water in the water filter there. In fact, the little rain harvesting system by my shop that's only 600 gallons, it pretty well stays full. I can't remember the last time I filled it, and it pretty well stays full of perfectly good drinking water for me year round. You know, I shower with that water and drink it. And just as a simple example of just how easy it really is to, you know, for one person, it doesn't take that much water. And then I use a lot of groundwater harvesting techniques to store thousands and thousands of gallons that can be used for the greenhouses or for livestock. And that's pretty sustainable. And I can get a well down the road. Food. I've got pigs out there. There's enough pigs out there to harvest 400 pounds of pork anytime. That's a year's supply of meat for me. And quite a bit of feed for the dogs. And as far as the gardens go, I probably get around 100 pounds of produce every year, which it's not a huge amount. But it's honestly more than I ever bought before. I probably eat more fruit and vegetables now than I ever did before. Power. I started with minimal solar systems and built my way up to now having, you know, just the system that I put on the shop was the biggest system I'd really ever had. And it's just 3 rack batteries and like a 6,000 watt hybrid charge controller inverter with probably 5,000 watts of input from solar panels and maybe 6,000 watts. That was really like a lot for me by the time I got that. And then now there's a system twice that size on the cabin. So everything together, you know, I'm even able to keep I've got a 4,500 gallon pond that'll stay pretty well full year round. And there's a pump large enough to keep it pretty clean. I've just got to build a little shade over that. And anyhow, that's the final, the very final system is income. And I'm just now finally spending a lot of time. The last few months, I've spent so much time, guys, building all kinds of free resources on my website for you guys. And the transparent thing, you know, behind that is, well, it helps me rank and get more traffic to my website. I've got a huge free guide and whatever. And the thing is I'm not a salesy person. So I give everything away for free. Everything anyone would ever have to know about what I did and how I started this frugal homestead is freely available. And then for people that want depth, I have, you know, ebooks and courses and things like that that can help with even more information. But that brings us up to now. The middle years. This is where I am. This is the part that I don't see on. I just haven't really seen anyone really, you know, hey, these are the middle years of homesteading. I guess a lot of people quit around now. But this is when the systems are all working together. Everything's running pretty smoothly. I just have to maintain systems. Occasionally I'll have to fix something or whatnot, improve something. The cabin is the first thing I really, I didn't want to build the cabin twice. I have no problem, you know, all the infrastructure I do with scrap material, and I've rebuilt the geothermal, I think 3 times now. It started with a cheap $200 build and a hole in the ground, and I worked up to about a $2,000 build. And the final step will be to put the same kind of posts that I've got in the cabin, post and beam basically, just make a heck of a structure inside that thing. And I might even cover it in glass the last time. And then it'll be done. It'll just be like this cabin. It'll last the rest of my life. And I'll probably build the pig pens in the same fashion and upgrade the horse stables. Basically, it would just need paneling, like this kind of paneling. I plan to fence the entire perimeter of my property now. I'm working on that to put, I'm going to put huge posts every 10 feet and then solid wood 6 feet tall around the entire property, and then another same fence, similar fence, that surrounds the entire homestead. And at any rate, I get to go back. I'm going back in passes through my systems, right? And I get to, you know, I guess what I was getting at is the cabin, I just nailed it the first time. This is great to go for life for me. And then now I can go back and improve the structures, all the infrastructure that got me going. I can improve those and make them lifelong. I've got underground cisterns, and all they are is a hole in the ground with a cheap liner. And they're, you know, if they've got a roof with a manhole, and I just pump water up out of them. And one day I can just line them with chicken wire and spray them with concrete, and they'll, you know, then they'll be permanent. And that won't take very long. And now, guys, working towards all that, getting all the systems in place, well, now I own the cabin. You know, I was having to come up with $700 to $1,400 a month for the whole year while I built this thing, right? Well, now that money's available to me. So I'm just putting it in the savings account for now. I do want to build a barn and make some improvements. But first, I'm going to get a massive emergency fund set aside. You know, savings, business savings. Focus on income a little bit more, you know, and just get really stable. Get a lot of stability. Create more structure and less pressure, like I like to say. So because a lot of content on the internet is pretty performative, it paints homesteading and off-grid living as a fantasy, basically. And that's why there's so many misconceptions about, you know, I'm not sure how, a lot of them aren't very logical, but there's a lot of assumptions that if somebody lives off-grid that they're trying to disappear like a spy in a movie, or that they have no plan to pay property tax, or that they're not going to pay self-employment tax, or that they could never just buy a self-employed health care plan. You know, so what they all have in common is that it's like that you no longer live in the real world, that it's a fantasy, and it's not. People that live off-grid and that homestead still have jobs or create income or pay taxes and property tax and have the internet and a cell phone, and you still live in the real world, you just live off-grid. So when people begin off-grid, homesteading, making that content, it gets a lot of attention. And when people complete a build or complete the absolute fantasy and it looks beautiful, that gets a lot of views. But the middle years is where off-grid life becomes real.